Hey guys, Randy Wilburn here from Gābl Media. Hope you're doing well. I've got another live stream for you. I apologize, I'm just a few minutes late starting this up. I had a couple of technical challenges that came up, but we are here and ready to go. It's funny, I have to constantly remind myself of why I'm doing this, and then also, more importantly, why this is even something that, that anybody would actually care about. I've gotten some great feedback from doing these live streams, and first of all, I just appreciate you taking time to listen to me talk and rant, and certainly is something that is important to me and a topic that I really enjoy talking about. I wanted to just take a minute. First of all, last week we had a chance to talk about a couple of things: the importance of storytelling, podcasting as a marketing tool, preserving company history, recruitment and retention, and leveraging partnerships. And it's one of the things that, so you can go back and watch that video from last week. It's there on the Gābl Media LinkedIn page. I've shared it out, and I also typically share these live streams out when all is said and done. I wanted to certainly encourage you to check it out when you get a moment, and just go from there. But today I wanted to do something a little different, and I wanted to talk about why integrated marketing matters. And simply what I mean by that is the fact that as a design firm, you don't want to rely on just one channel. Right? You want to have multiple channels available to you. You want to be able to get things going with more than just one platform or one channel, right? So it's like, if you have a website, that's great, but that's not the only thing that you should be doing in terms of getting the word out about your company. You should probably have some social media channels, right? Some places where you can go to tell the story of your company, to talk about the work that you're doing, to talk about the people that run your company, to talk about the difference that you make in the design industry space. And I think it's important for us to just think about the different channels that we are utilizing within our marketing apparatus at our company. And those channels are important for a number of reasons, the least of which is that as a company, as a brand, you have to be telling your story early and often. And you've heard me say that. I will say that till the cows come home. But you also have to give people some information about who you are, right? And not everyone is going to consume information about your brand directly through your website. They may watch videos on your YouTube channel if you have one. They may listen to your podcast if you have one. They may follow you on Instagram or follow you on LinkedIn if you operate in those spaces. And by the way, every design firm that is listening to this, every design professional, if you work for a company and your company doesn't have a robust LinkedIn page, you're making a huge mistake. I think it's important for us to be willing early and often to get the word out about who we are and what we're doing and what separates us from everybody else. And I get it. Sometimes as a design professional, as an engineer, or as an architect, or you fill in the blank design professional, we don't always think that the work that we do really matters, but it does. Civil engineers design culverts. Culverts aren't sexy, but culverts are necessary, right? There are a number of jobs, there are a number of projects that you do that aren't like sexy, aren't really like that get the juices flowing, but they're necessary. And I think sometimes you can actually control the narrative about the work that you do and about what separates you from everybody else just by talking about simple things like that. I remember a good friend of mine told me that he was riding down the road with his wife, and he was like, yeah, I designed that. And it was literally a ditch in the road. And she was like, you designed that? Now, it was a culvert, the technical or fancy word for it. But she was like, that really? And she was like, unimpressed until he started walking her through the purpose of it, why it was designed in the first place, and what it will do. And I think a lot of times when you become a design professional and you spend all those years in school studying engineering, studying architecture, you, after a while, get comfortable with the knowledge and information that you have. The problem is that everybody else around you doesn't have that information and or knowledge. And so it's incumbent upon you to tell stories early and often about what you do, why you do it, why it matters, why your clients even need your services. And again, it can become a very cerebral exercise for design professionals who choose not to embrace the ability to talk about the work that they do and to share it with a wider audience, whether or not they understand the technical nature behind the work that you do. You can talk about that technical nature. You can talk about why certain designs are important. I remember listening to Kit Miyamoto come up with some type of design that he came up with for a building that had a statue in the middle of it. And this building was susceptible to problems because of earthquakes in that region where this building was. And he talked about how they built some type of movable floor that just ebbed and flowed with the movement of the earth whenever there was an earthquake in that region. And I thought, man, how ingenious is that to come up with that? Something, I'm a layperson, I wouldn't know. I have served the design industry since 1997. I am not a design professional. I am design professional adjacent, right? That's my way of describing it. But I know enough to be dangerous, and I also know enough to know that you guys don't tell your story well. And that can come, that may manifest itself in some of the channels that you offer up with regard to your websites. They're very boring. They're very bland. They don't tell the whole story. They're very surfacey, and you don't keep people wanting more, right? And it's like good copy. When you read a good book, anything with a good story, you want more, right? When I think about the arc of a storyline, and it's like watching Star Wars. And I remember, and I've talked about this before, but in 1977, when the curtain closed on Star Wars, the first episode with Luke Skywalker, which was technically the fourth, but that's a whole nother story. I thought that it just left me wanting more. I was like, wait a minute, this can't be it. They just ride off into the sunset and they beat the Empire and blow up the Death Star. No, there's got to be more. And it's that you want people coming back to say there's got to be more. And your story has more to it. You just have to know how to tell it properly so that people realize that. Your brand, who you are as a company and an organization, it's all related to that. And you have to leverage the channels that are available and or are at your disposal when it comes to telling your story. And one of the things is that you have to figure out ways to leverage more marketing channels than you're currently leveraging. If you are currently just leveraging static marketing channels like a website, you are missing out. Even in some social media channels, if you are not incorporating sound and video, you're missing out on really telling the whole story of who your organization is. And excuse me. I want to encourage you to be thinking about what are the other channels that you could be exploring. And podcasting is certainly one way for you to create multiple channels that will then allow you to push out your information to the world in a number of different ways. And let me just break it down. If you create a podcast, and I've talked about this a little bit before, you have the ability to repurpose that content. First of all, the podcast should stand on its own. So now you have this great podcast. Maybe it's a 20 or 30 minute conversation that you had with some people internally within your organization. Maybe you interviewed your favorite client. Maybe you interviewed a potential client. It's the best way to do a podcast. I tell you what, you get turned down by a potential client and then say to them, hey, we really appreciate you guys. Would love to just sit down and have you guys on our podcast to talk about the work that you're doing and the designs that are really moving you at this point in time. They're never going to say no. They're going to be like, yeah, absolutely, sure. You know what? That's the next best thing. We can't work with you right now, but we'd love to come on your podcast. And then eventually down the road, you will build up goodwill. And I've done this before, to the point where those people will come back to you and say, hey, I think we're ready to work with you guys. And it's one of those things where you've got to be willing to try new things. And to me, podcasting is one of those new things. So let's just say you start a podcast. You put little short stories out, little vignettes. It could be 10 minutes. It could be 20, 30, doesn't matter. It could be long form, Joe Rogan style, 3 hours, right? Maybe not. But anyway, I want you to start off small. I want you to think about, okay, I want to just tell this one story. Okay, great. You tell that story, you put it out there. Now you take that information from that story and break it up, because typically every story has a beginning, middle, and end. And so you now have content that is available to you that you can then repurpose. You can make an audiogram. You could potentially make a videogram. You could utilize the actual transcript from that conversation and then cut it up into a carousel post that you can then put out on LinkedIn, that you could then put out on Instagram, that you could then put out on fill in the blank, your favorite social media platform. And when you think of a carousel post, think of like a carousel going around and round. The bottom line is it starts with an idea or a thought. Maybe it's a great quote from your conversation. Then it goes to the next thought, or then it goes to an idea beyond in that thought. And then you keep going down there and you make your point. And maybe the carousel is 4 or 5 slides, but you have those and you keep somebody's interest until the end. And then maybe you end with asking a question. What do you think about whatever you're talking about? And then you open yourself up to getting comments and feedback. And so I really want to encourage you to take advantage of that and just basically get out there and tell your story through podcasting. Now, the other thing is, the idea here with podcasting is I am not suggesting that you replace what you're already doing with podcasting. As a matter of fact, I'm saying to you, add to what you're doing with podcasting. Podcasting is an and, it isn't an or. So do everything that you're doing and figure out a way to do podcasting. Even if it's something small, a couple of episodes a year, telling interesting stories about your organization will go a long way. But especially for firms, for companies, I think that you putting together a podcast will now allow you to share your information and your thought leadership in different formats and in different ways on both Instagram and LinkedIn, which is huge. I think about a lot of posts that I've put out on each of those platforms, and sometimes I'm surprised at some of the simplest ideas that come out of them and gain traction. I'll give you an example. I literally took a napkin and wrote a quote that I had come up with or shared on a podcast. And I took a picture of that napkin and put it out on LinkedIn and got 5,000 likes for one concept, one idea, one quote. Doesn't take much. And every time you create really good content, you ultimately are creating several smaller pieces of micro content that you can use and leverage. And your marketing team, they should be aware of that, and they should understand the concept of micro content within the social media space and how you leverage that, how you repurpose content. One 20-minute podcast episode now becomes 4 carousels It might be 3 quotables. It might be a bunch of stuff. So now instead of just one 20-minute piece of audio, you've got one 20-minute piece of audio. You've got 5 Instagram posts, 5 LinkedIn posts, because you can sometimes post some of the same things on LinkedIn as you do on Instagram. Don't have to do it at the same time, because remember, you have potentially different audiences, right? Don't assume that people that see your stuff on Instagram are going to also see it on LinkedIn. No, there's a different audience over there on LinkedIn. There are people on LinkedIn that have never been on Instagram and vice versa. So it's part of that kind of be everywhere mentality that you really need to take advantage of. But I would encourage you to just do what you got to do to get that information out there. There are other things that I want to mention, again, about blogging and content sharing. Obviously, if you have a blog, you want to maintain it. I enjoy going to people's blogs and seeing that they haven't posted something for more than a year. That is problematic at best. And I've even been guilty of that, just because we have a lot of irons in the fire over here. But the bottom line is that you have to be posting something as much as you can. Now, it doesn't mean you have to post something every day, but it does mean when you do post something, you post something of consequence, of substance, of value. And people will know that, oh, I need to tune into what these guys are doing because they are sharing some really good information. But I want you to think about that and how you take advantage of that. The other thing is that you can talk about newsletters, and you can share information on your newsletter from your podcast. That content would be super valuable. That's another way to improve upon or tie back into what you're doing on your podcast in your newsletter. And then, of course, there are some things that I've done with regard to podcasting that have afforded us the ability to do webinars from them, to create virtual events, to establish additional client engagement and networking opportunities. Like I said, I have never been turned down to feature somebody on a podcast. I've been told maybe not right now, but never unequivocally no. There have been a few people that have been like, oh, I'm mortified of getting behind a microphone. I get all that. That's not a problem. But for the most part, I've always been able to connect with folks and get them to share. So some other things that you need to think about too, in the value of making sure that your brand has a voice and that people understand what that voice is all about, is that you create consistency with your brand by putting it out in different verticals and in different channels. So you've got your website, you've got that voice. Maybe you have the similar voice over here on the podcast. You've got the same similar voice over here with social media. There are a number of different ways for you to leverage that and take advantage of it. But I've found that just coming up with different ideas of what you're going to talk about leads itself to you sharing a wide variety of information that really can be super helpful. One of the things that I did with one client was we just told stories about the newcomers to the firm and leveraged those stories as they went out to recruit new people. They said, yeah, you want to know what it's like working here at XYZ firm? Listen to these 5 podcast episodes. They're all short in length, but it gives you a feeling or an understanding about our firm, what makes us special, and more importantly, why you should consider coming here to work. And with the way that Gen Z especially consumes content and information in a digital format, you're just being where people are as opposed to forcing anybody. It's like these folks are here anyway, so you might as well provide them with some additional in-depth information about your brand, about your firm, what separates you from everybody else, and why a young up-and-coming engineer, a young up-and-coming architect that's just graduating from, I don't know, the U of A or UCLA or USC or NYU should come work at your firm. Clemson, doesn't matter. You get the idea. Tell those stories as much as possible. there are a number of ways that you can integrate podcasting to improve your marketing, to expand your offerings, to engage people in different ways. And they're just simple tactics that you can leverage and use in order to get the word out about your brand. And podcasting is certainly one way to do that. And then the other thing too is that when you do create a podcast, you're able to get multiple people from different parts of the company involved in the process. You may have somebody that's great that has a voice for radio, right? Like I do, a face for radio, if you will. And it's an opportunity for them to maybe exercise a muscle that they have, but they haven't really been able to exercise that in terms of the spoken word. Maybe you have somebody that's very creative, likes chopping up and messing around with videos. And if you're recording a podcast video, you could give them some opportunities to create some really unique pieces of content to share out on multiple platforms. There are a number of ways to leverage this content for your marketing efforts. I don't know. To me, I see it very clearly, and obviously it's because I've been doing it for a long time, but my encouragement is simply for you to try it. Come up with a simple series of episodes that you can do. Maybe just talk about your origin story. Keep it simple. Talk about your origin story, the founder, maybe the co-founder. Talk about some of the challenges that you overcame. Talk about some of the amazing clients that you deal with, and maybe interview one or two of the clients. And maybe feature one or two of the, what I would call cornerstone projects that you've worked on, the kind of projects that you mention them all the time. People know, they know you. Okay, great. I'm going to mention this. So the designer of the Transamerica building, I'm sure leveraged that concept and idea as much as possible because it's an iconic structure in an iconic city. The Millennium Tower in New York City. I think about people like Zaha Hadid and the quality of work that her firm put out while she was alive and then even after. I think about Moshe Shafti, who was the primary designer of Crystal Bridges here in my backyard, Northwest Arkansas. Moshe is a friend of Alice Walton, the richest woman in the world, who just lives up the road from where I am. And he is the designer of Crystal Bridges. And if you haven't seen Crystal Bridges, Google it. Take a look at it. Stunning facility. They're just about to add an additional 250,000 square feet to the museum. But it's actually one of the reasons why we decided to call Northwest Arkansas home. But there are just so many cool stories around design work, and that's just one example. But I would highly recommend that you figure out a way to tell as many stories as possible around your organization, around your brand, and go from there. And then, listen, I get it. Everything that I'm discussing requires time and resources, some of which can be limited for most design firms. And I think that in some instances, once you decide to go down this road, you need to figure out how you partner up with somebody else to help you out. It's just like with your clients. When they decide they're going to build something, who do? Where they call an engineer. They don't build it themselves. They call an architect. They don't design it themselves. So in the same way that you would consider that if you wanted to create something new, talk to the professionals, talk to people that have done this before, have some experience in this area, not just somebody that can flip on a switch and press record, but somebody that can then give you some ideas about how best to leverage your brand so that you can put it out there to the world for them to consume. Yeah, there's just a lot of things happening. And with AI, I was just listening to a podcast this morning about AI, go figure, and it's about to change phenomenally. And I think that there is going to be a space where you will be able to leverage the stories that you tell through audio, through voice, in a multitude of ways just because you have AI. and you'll be able to serve up information about your organization in a very unique way, leveraging AI in the near future. Now, I'm just excited about what the possibilities are, and I'm more excited for you to discover ways to get your company out there and to tell your story early and often, as I like to say. It's like my favorite thing. Those are some things that I always like to mention. Just think about that. Think about the different channels and ways that you can market yourself beyond the normal stuff that you're doing. Think about just starting off small, integrating some basic technology to get your word out, to get the information out about your firm through a podcast, whether audio exclusively, which is compact and portable, or audio and video, which is a little heavier lift when it comes to editing and everything. But you do have the benefit of having both this interaction here like we're having, but you also have the actual audio as well. And so that's one of the things I like about doing these live streams, is that I'm then able to take this audio and video and repurpose it in a number of different ways. Something to think about. And again, there are going to be challenges, but you got to keep an open mind when it comes to utilizing this type of content and moving into areas that you are typically uncomfortable with. It's just uncomfortable for a short period of time. Once you get the hang of it and understand the value and the benefits of creating multiple channels to talk about your brand and to tell your story, you will understand that you can go out there and make a difference in the world. And so I want to thank you for being a part of this conversation, and just take your time, consider to think about it. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. You can message me on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me, rwilburn at GāblMedia.com, and we can chat about this and talk about your hang up with podcasting, or even why you don't think podcasting is a good deal, right? Share with me. Let me know. I'd love to hear from you and learn why you feel that way and go from there. But anyway, that's all I have. My name is Randy Wilburn. I am the Director of Business Development with Gābl Media. I work on a number of different things. I'm a serial podcaster. I've put out almost 1,800 episodes since 2009. So this isn't my first rodeo. And I stress this, I do understand the value of audio and specifically of podcasting. And I understand the value of it within the ecosystem and framework of a design organization. So if you are a design firm that has a great story, but you need to get it out there, let me know. I'd be happy to help. I'd be happy to walk you through some things. If you're seeing this video after the fact, just let me know, and we'll be happy to catch up with you and talk about what you're doing and how we might be able to help you out. But that's all I have for you right now. I appreciate you guys so much for indulging me, and we'll see you back here next week with another live stream. I'm actually going to do a shorter live stream next week, so catch me. It's going to be quick. That's all I have. I will catch up with you guys soon. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. It's Wednesday, October 2nd. I can't believe it's October already, 2024. I'm Randy Wilburn. We'll talk soon. Peace.